The Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium presents Catherine Al-Meten Meyers and Robert Nielsen, recorded live via Zoom on March 14, 2021.
So, Catherine Al-Meten Meyers is a poet, a mystery novelist, and a writer of inspirational nonfiction. Her latest book, written under the pen name C.J. Myers, is the second in the Lenora Whitley mystery series, Body in the Gallery. Set in a small town on the rugged Oregon coast, Body in the Gallery brings murder, mayhem, international intrigue, and crime to the calm of this small coastal community. Catherine is the founder of Whales and Nightingales Press, an independent publishing company, and she also assists other authors, artists, musicians, photographers, and creative people with various stages of publication.
Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of poems from each of the books I've written. The first time I read at the Monterey Poetry Consortium, I read from my very first book. In fact, I was inspired to write it because I knew I had that reading to do, to pull poems together from a long period of time. So that was Shadows. The next book that I wrote is called L'amour et la miel, which means love is the honey. And this is a collection of poems that I'd written over a long span of time, some of which had gotten lost. And in fact, one of my friends is online here today with us, Sherry, and she had found my poems in a folder and given them to me. And that made this book possible. So I brought things from way in the past, years, decades before, and then updated it too. So the one that I'm going to start with today is called New Moons. And we just had a new moon. We're in a new moon phase a couple nights ago, or last night, the night before last. New moons, times of dark openings into dreams, depths, desires, gateways at midnight when lovers meet, hearts collide, time stands still. Under starry skies, resting in each other's breath and arms, reveries, we set out plans on altars of stone, like linen cloths holding wishes made upon conjoining Venus and Luna, sunset's afterglow. Tonight we dream together apart, sending thoughts like prayers out onto the energy streams to travel across miles, eons, eternity. In one moment, caressing lifetimes to heart, in love alone, casting stars across the moonless sky. And this next poem is called Treasures, Tresoras. Treasures of seasons, tresoras lost beneath, Tierra del Sol, lost, forgotten, buried dreams beneath layers of river silt, rich, warm blanket of deeply frozen dreams, souls in burial chambers released from form to energy, lifted on spring breezes, blown away by winter gales, evaporating on summer's hottest days, falling lightly in mists of spring and deluges of autumn or spring melody, pull the shade of day's end across rooftops and distant hills, scattered silver clouds left to drift out of sight. Now evening calls, lanterns light the narrow street, old brown brick church. A fearsome sentry barks his lowly growl, reminding his neighbors of his watch. All is well as the old dog ambles back to his warm corner on this early spring evening. Days pass with a graceful ease as all wander a little slower, passing time, inspecting new blossoms or leaves, marveling at a tree. Each day, the magic of spring, and for hundreds of years, no people ever seemed so glad to welcome the sight of tulips, daffodils, and robins on the wing. Winter in New England passed slowly in this year, in fountains where light caught the first rainbows of spring, wishing to linger near enough, long enough to remember joys passing roses, waiting to surprise the old woman as she searches anew each day for new life to greet. Quietly move on about spring, being mindful not to rush past the gifts of the sun's glimmer, lilacs floating on the breeze, grasses soft beneath your knees, dew warm on the morning's leaves, squirrels in chase, birds busy feeding, building nests. We pass all mindful of one another. Icy flows of winter begin to break on the river. Tresoras, treasures, Terra del Sol, cycling seasons, souls of soul. When I was looking at the poems and trying to decide what to write or what to read, I thought about what inspires us to do our art, to write our poetry, to paint our paintings, to create our gardens, whatever it is we love to create. And I'm reminded it's very simple little moments. It's not the big things so much nearly as it is the little tiny moments that inspire me, especially with poetry. The poem I just read, I wrote when I was living for the first time in New England in the middle of going through my very first New England winter over 30 years ago. So, but it still rings true for me now when I am looking for signs of spring around me. The next one was inspired when I was living in La Jolla many years ago, and I would take a nap in the afternoons because it was so hot on the living room rug. And the person next door was a pianist. And I would leave my windows open and he would be sitting at his grand piano playing in the afternoon. And that's how I would just spend my afternoons listening to that. Piano etudes in the afternoon. No one-act plays for modern stage. Lightning doesn't, more than rain. Quit is still by design, never more languid, rough-hewn and refined. He plays long etudes meant for elaborate stages. I am stirred. Another book that I wrote, which has I'm going to hold it up so you can see it. I took this picture. I don't know whether, can you see this at all? Is it visible? Okay, I took this from atop Lover's Point. I was looking over at the very edge down onto the rocks one day. I was actually with my husband. We were standing there together. I hadn't seen him in a long time. And we had taken a long trip together and we were standing looking down, and there is a woman at the on the rocks in her wedding dress, barefoot, just sitting there by herself. The wedding party's up on the little grass plain, and I took that photo of her. And it sparked all kinds of memories for me and all kinds of thoughts. And it's kind of one of my favorite photographs because I didn't actually realize what I had till I got home. But this book is called Woman on the Run. Woman on the Run. And these poems span from about 2015 to maybe a couple of years ago. I asked my friends couple of my friends to tell me which poems they liked. And so these are some of the ones they liked. And there also happen to be ones I like. Beginnings of a blues song. My songs are bluesy, sad, and strong. They're songs of life and love. They're songs of spirit and divine that wrap us up in love. Wherever I go, whatever I do, the roads I travel and the things I do, the longing in my heart, my guide, it all leads back to you. This is called Fragile Oasis, and I started writing it when I was on a plane. And I think it was when I was flying across the country, kind of in the middle of summer, and there were fireworks. It was at night. I was coming from Connecticut to San Francisco, and there were fireworks all across the country that night. And so it was like just before sunset, and then I got the fireworks a little later, but I could still see the blue as I'm traveling west. Fragile Oasis. Planet blue turning back and gazing at you like no other star or planet in the galaxy. Fragile oasis of blue. Auroras dancing across your face. Lightning striking as fireworks flashing o'er cities, mountains, and plains. Fragile oasis of blue. Orbiting round in a solar dance. 3 places from the sun. Spinning in orbit, egg-like globe, fragile oasis of blue. Wobbling on axis, shining like a star, covered entirely in blue, delicate atmosphere hovering above our fragile oasis of blue. Were we able to see how lines we have drawn have damaged our homeland and scarred up our dawns, we might walk more gently. We might treat more kindly our fragile oasis of blue. We ride on our starship blind to the sun and blinder still to what we have done, to the waters, the land, the air, and the sky on our fragile oasis of blue. Divine breath of dawn, divine life of day, remember our place in the chain of creation, to tend and to carry the life of the earth, the child of our mother, our fragile oasis of blue. Sun moves north or western horizon, dips back into the sea, curve of the earth reminding us of our journey, spinning through space, spiraling ever beyond our place in infinity, watching explosions, bursting life, beginnings and endings, past into future, blowing into being on the breath of creation. Life's precious beauty, gift of creator, fostering, tending, creating, preserving beauty, embracing, mending, loving, cherishing, filling up senses, feeding desires, giving all life. We tending fires, growing, destroying, learning, seeking, finding our place in the cosmos, calling us aboard starship, our fragile oasis of blue. This is called Ancestor Spirits. Ancestor spirits awaken me, long forgotten, left to sleep, the deep rest in peace slumber. Centuries open up, revealing wisps and flickers in the corner of memory. Light and shadows cast over Oz flames, burning in forgetfulness. Around me, walking, standing, hovering, dancing, waiting, wondering what I might do with their stories, so many left untold and unfinished. Voiceless women hidden in long lines, bearing many children, holding themselves together in straight-laced dresses, behind staid and proper lives, most of them. Looking in the mirror, seeing the same face, hair pulled back, revealing a face akin to those women, standing instead In a loose, long dishdasha, shimmering designs of golden thread, red and gold design lighting up my breast. From my grandmother comes a restless streak, a yen to loosen ties that bind, letting go of some of what binds us from living according to our own desires. Strong-willed women struggling against the reins of the men's world, breaking out of rules, securities, and stabilities to see more clearly what life can be. Pushing past limits, breaking the locks on the way out the door, taking steps not traveled before. We leave a trail strewn with memories, ideas, observations, and wild imaginations run rampant upon the earth. We travel beyond anything ever dreamed of, longed for, imagined, hoped for, or conceived of by those women whose shoulders we stand on. If those women whose blood runs in my veins, whose very essence and being fill me up, infuse me with desire and dreams, and shape my very essence, they are honored and remembered. It is my duty to live life fully and pass along courage, patience, tenacity, aplomb, a serene inner knowledge, wisdom gleaned of experience and reflection, and the wisdom to know the value of love, support, affirmation, and divine grace.
Well, we have a good congregation here this afternoon. I can't even get everyone on one screen at one time, and that's. But welcome to all. We have some who have joined midstream. I really followed through on the resonances as Catherine spoke of not rushing past, and then took us through the journey that she takes, the sight of tulips, daffodils, robins on the wing, and at a given moment, that can be absolutely everything. It can be the alpha and the omega, as she speaks of finding our place in the cosmos. And I was also struck here with the poem referring to the airplane flight. I don't think in my adult life I have ever gone this long without an airplane flight. And right now it seems almost bizarre to ever do that again. I can't even imagine right now, although I do have quite a collection of bonus miles. At any rate, I very much enjoyed Catherine taking us on that airplane flight and seeing the curve of the earth. And we are among the first generations, the very first generations of human beings ever to have such an experience. So it's good to register that and speak to it. If you have not muted yourself and you're not the poet, please do. I think everyone has either done that or has tried to do it. Our adventures in Zoomlandia. So it is my very special pleasure to introduce Bob Nielsen today. I don't deal with chronological time as seriously as I once did because it just becomes difficult to keep track of actually what chronological time means sometime. But at any rate, Bob, I have enjoyed friendship with Bob for many years. I really, honestly, Bob, for $1 million, I couldn't say how long that is. But I've known Bob well enough to appreciate how he has the capacity to reinvent himself, and you can experience a lot of reinvention processes in Bob's, all of his artistic output, which includes poetry and stories, very rich stories, and wonderful photography. Bob has bonzer capacities to reinvent himself. My one chance to display my knowledge of the Australian language. So Robert Nielsen is a Carmel Valley poet, writer, and photographer, and has segued into full-time art making after practicing law for many years. Born in Australia, with roots also in New Zealand, Denmark, the British Isles, France, and Spain, he has lived, studied, worked, and traveled in a number of countries. His art is narrative and representative in nature, reflecting his perceptions, feelings, dreams, and stories, and also his worldwide experiences. His poetry has appeared in various anthologies, journals, and other publications, and his award-winning photographs have been exhibited and included in public and private galleries and collections in the USA and other countries. So how good to have the poetry of Robert Nielsen today.
Thanks, John. Or I should say, good day, mate. Well, thank you. And thank you, Catherine. You know, I said 20 years ago, it really is more like closer to 9 or 10 years ago that we first read together. And I, like John, I don't know where chronological time has gone. I, for the life of me, cannot comprehend that it's about a decade since we did that.
Neither can I, so it's okay.
And thank you all for being here, including John Lowy, who's with us. And we owe him a lot for what he does to keep us running here. And also we have folks today from all over the world. I see people from New Zealand, Pennsylvania, Cape Cod, Canada, and other locations. I'm sure I'm missing some, Nebraska too. It's remarkable what this miracle of Zoom will allow us to do. What I'm going to do today, with your indulgence, is share with you a combination of poetry and photographs. And I'm going to do so via Zoom sharing, screen sharing, which is going to mean that mostly we'll have the screen with something on it, and then I'll be off to the side. If you set your settings to speaker view, it'll just be me off to the side. If you set your settings to gallery view, there'll be me plus a few of us on the other side. We'll just go through this. We are recording this, as we mentioned in the email that went out. So we will have the ability in time to refine this recording and then get the video up on our YouTube channel. All right, folks. I think, is everybody, can you nod and tell me if you're, all right. So I'm going to share with you this afternoon a presentation or an experience of poetry, photos, and pandemic. And although John Lowy hadn't planned it this way, it turns out that today's reading is happening around the time of the first anniversary of the beginning of the impact of COVID in America. We are starting, as Winston Churchill said, to experience the beginning of the end, but we still do have it in spades. Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be out of this, contingent on vaccinations, the ability for people to be vaccinated, for their vaccines to control variants, and for people practicing safe behaviors throughout the country. This has been an amazing year. I don't think any of us have known anything like this before. Perhaps our grandparents knew something like this when the horror and chaos of World War I devolved into the Spanish flu pandemic that swept the world. That being said, I think it's clearly new for us. What I've done is find myself writing and photographing in response to what's been going around me and in response to my own thinking and my feelings. I've done this for release and for comfort. And also I wanted to create a record of sorts for my grandchildren so that they would know and experience a little bit of what we've gone through. And I've been aided throughout this by two publications and a group of people. I want to, if I can make this thing work, there we go. I'd call your attention to an anthology called Second Wind, Words and Art of Hope and Resilience, that Kate Avram and Melody Culver produced earlier, last fall. It's a remarkable anthology. I was privileged to be able to contribute to it. And that was one of the wonderful outlets that were there, along with the Monterey Poetry Review, Spring 2021 issue, which Jennifer Lugier and Kate Avram and Laura Bayless put out. And I was privileged to have some of my work, my photographs and poems in there. And that kind of helped me go along as things just progressed. Also, too, I'm in a fortnightly writing group headed by Aaliyah Thompson, who is with us along with her good friend Herman this afternoon. We meet every couple of weeks. We get a prompt at 10 o'clock via the web. We get to go write for an hour, and then 11 o'clock we get back together again and we read what we've written. Some of what I will share with you today began actually in those fortnightly writing group meetings, and some of what appears of mine in Second Wind and in the Monterey Poetry Review likewise had its roots in our sessions every 2 weeks. Well, let's go into it. This past year began for my wife, Kathy, and me in New Zealand. We traveled there early in March for a family reunion with plans then to go on to Australia. I was born in Australia. My grandfather was born in New Zealand. I have a lot of wonderful cousins and an uncle in both countries. Storm clouds, though, of the pandemic began to form while we were in Wellington, New Zealand's wonderful capital. Their consequence is reflected in a poem that I would like to now share with you. And it has a photograph or a montage that goes with it. The poem, Ahead of the Pandemic. 6,000 miles we'd flown, last 2 seats of the last flight home, pandemic bearing down, quarantine exclusion about to begin. Our daughter taking care of the house warned us via FaceTime what was coming. We were in New Zealand, my family reunion to be continued in Australia with cousins there. But now cut short, we had to get back to California, to SFO, immigration, customs, impatient lines, no distancing, no masks yet to be seen. The Airbus didn't come. We rented a car, wiped it down with handy wipes we bought in Auckland, drove 2 hours home to Carmel Valley. Listened to news on the radio, talk of quarantine, but no one knew. The president tweeted it's a hoax. Health experts said otherwise. Our daughter was waiting, greeted us in the driveway. No hugging, just to be safe. Didn't know what we might be carrying. We talked at a distance, then said goodbye, took our luggage in, the view of the valley outside unchanged, peaceful, quiet, seemed to be unaware. She left music on the stereo, a classical station she knows I like, and a note on the kitchen table telling us to look in the fridge. She'd shopped for us, and on the top shelf, 2 Boomerang brand Aussie meat pies we could have for dinner. The note said, yes, we couldn't be in Australia, but a bit of my country could be here with us. Tears came. I read her note again. Our daughter, her thoughtfulness, her caring, a gift, filling my world that moment and nothing more needed. Yes, a pandemic and lockdown coming, but her love, her kindness present now and with us always. Kindness, come what may, abiding always. Well, we returned home to life under lockdown, and all the seasons that then ensued over the last several months, experiences and lessons that continue to happen to us. And out of this experience, one of the things that I did to keep time was write a couple of poems and a haiku. And let me share a haiku with you now that came to me. Pandemic. Palm Sunday at home, sheltering and blessed with rain, gratitude, love, hope. And as we sheltered in place, it came to me that we were really privileged to be able to do that. And that then produced a poem for me that I've titled Remember. Remember. Sheltering in place, we need please to remember those who cannot do so. Homeless, travelers far from home, people alone, those without the web, no internet, just separation. And all whose duties are to serve and provide for we in lockdown, essential workers, their families and lives, second to our needs. Nurses, doctors, EMT teams, ICU teams, grocery store staff, farmers, truckers, UPS, FedEx, other drivers, postal service people, packers filling online orders, police officers, National Guard soldiers, cafeteria workers, food bank volunteers, all giving so we for our protection can be safe, outwait the silent plague stalking our weary world. In time we will prevail and survive and return with love, stronger though, for ourselves, for each other, and certainly for those who are living their lives today for us. In response to the ongoing pandemic, the Midwest Center for Photography mounted an exhibition, and I was pleased to be able to contribute this series of images that reflect life as it had become and where we were going. They're in black and white, which seemed to fit. And they simply recorded for me daily life, plus coupled with a hope through the blossoms of life continuing and improving. But what I found myself doing was, as this pandemic progressed, and I guess a lot of us have done, is I retreated to a sanctuary, the sanctuary of my home with Kathy, and in particular, my studio, which is where I'm sitting now, and of which this is part. I would sit there on the couch and read and journal and otherwise be safe, withdrawn from all that could be going on outside. Interestingly, I hadn't planned on it, but the book on the sofa there is a gentleman in Moscow, and I don't know if you folks have read that. It's about a fellow who spent 60, 70 years locked up in a hotel under house arrest in Moscow, and that seemed, in retrospect, very fitting. So the pandemic continued, and in the early weeks of the pandemic, actually in April and then May 2nd, my wife and I became grandparents, and our daughter became an aunt, or as we would say in Australia and New Zealand, an aunt. Our son and daughter-in-law gave birth to their son in Pennsylvania, 3,000 barrier miles away. We've yet to be with him and hold him. He's now almost a year old. We know him only through the blessings of Zoom, for which we are very, very grateful. And that's how we know him. And that's how he knows us, we hope. He seems maybe to recognize us. He's a lot older now. And in fact, I can see him sitting in the room where he and his folks are tuning in from Pennsylvania. Well, this experience let's say it was not the best of all worlds, but it was wonderful at least to have the gift and the blessing of being able to communicate via Zoom. But with this behind me, I responded to the efforts of, there's a photography group in Monterey on the peninsula that I belong to called the Image Makers. And they mounted an exhibition at the Carl Cherry Center in Carmel. I responded by contributing a pair of haiku in an almost pop-up kind of mounting and insubstantial and yet very substantial framed presentation using Post-its on a print of a Facebook post that I'd made 8 years ago. And I titled it Lockdown Lifted. Lockdown Lifted. In-N-Out Burger, fries, chocolate shake, Buddy Holly playing loud. Road trip to see my grandson born during the height of the pandemic. And so that sort of, that was an expression of hope. And it helped. It still does. I have it right here. And it's great to see it. Well, then came summer. And as if the pandemic was not enough to test us, the US experienced violent reactions to years, really centuries of structural racism, culminating this time in police murders of George Floyd and others. And rioting started to break out in cities, becoming almost routine. It reminded us of 1968, when there were similar riots and disturbances. The federal government, as we know, sent unmarked federal, quote, police from various agencies to Portland, Oregon and other cities, ostensibly to protect federal buildings and to quell violence. But the reaction, of course, was often more violence. And in Portland one night, Oregon, there was a surreal response to this deployment of armed force. I say surreal because that's the only word that I could use to describe it. And it prompted me to write a poem in the form of this letter, which it's actually in one of the books here. And I titled it, the poem, really, if you look at it, and the letter, Naked Athena. And here it is, and I'll read it to you. Mon amour. There's a video running on TV here in Paris, but in Spanish for some reason. How this woman walked up to federal brown shirts in Portland, naked, completely, stood there open, exposed. They fired tear gas in her direction. She did yoga asanas on the cold, hard pavement. Her leg was bleeding. The press calls her Naked Athena. Some say she's an exhibitionist. Others, she's taking away from Black Lives Matter the purpose of the demonstrations. Still others that maybe she's Black, at least in part. She reminded me of Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People here in the Louvre, or Collier's Lady Godiva in that museum in Bristol. Maybe she's always, but mostly for me, she's also metaphor, perhaps intended, of what it means to be open, to resist and be vulnerable. Stand there totally naked in front of brute force and power. No barriers, bars, protections, just yourself as you are. Taking it all off and being and doing what you need to do completely. She came, stood there, she left. No one knows who she is. I won't forget it. Can't think of anyone or anything more honest, completely open. Here's a picture I took of her on my TV screen. God, I wish I had her courage and power. Je t'aime, mon amour. Écris-moi, tu me manques toujours. Well, then, as if that weren't enough, on top of all this, wildfires erupted last summer all throughout the Western United States. 2 of them got going in our area, literally sparked by unseasonal climate change lightning. So we had to evacuate. Here's a montage of the smoke in our valley, obscuring the sun, us loading up, the empty wall in our bedroom of where we've taken off pictures that we took with us, and our front door with a notice on it to the fire and the police that yes, this home had been evacuated. And we were able to stay with some kind friends from our church down on the coast. And after 3 days, our house spared, we were able to return home. And back we came. All remaining evacuation orders had been lifted for the Carmel fire, which was the fire that immediately threatened us. And as we found, and as we returned home, what had continued was life. Our sunflowers were blooming. And that led me to write this short poem titled, "In the Midst of a Pandemic." In the midst of a pandemic, record heat, smoke, and fires, our sunflowers still thrive, earth and we abide. And when I went around to the front of the house, we have a little koi pond, and here was further testament to earth and life abiding. Well, we got through the summer. The seasons kept doing what they do, which is to come along. And we were marking, as we do, the movement of the planets. And so I recorded with a couple of haikus, the equinox and the solstice. And here's a small one for the autumnal equinox last week. Equinox sunset, heelstone notch on Snively's ridge, earth, light, life abide. The Snively's ridge is part of Pinyon Peak across the valley from us. And there in that notch, at every equinox, the sun sets. I call it a heelstone because it's reminiscent of what happens over in Stonehenge. And it's our celestial calendar. Then came the solstice. Solstice. Sun low in the sky, winter solstice has come, and with it, light reborn. And with the solstice, as days shortened, it came to me in all of the ongoing noise that had continued to accumulate over the year, a reminder which led me to write this poem, What I Really Want to Say. What I really want to say is, and I should back up, this is dated December 21, 2020. And I'm not sure what the blue line is. Someone has, I think, used marker on the screen if you see it. What I really want to say, December 21, 2020. What I really want to say is that I don't know what I really want to say. Yes, I have the floor this winter solstice late afternoon and the mic, and you're listening, ready, waiting for me to say something. But in fact, there's nothing that I do want to say right now. Nothing, at least, that I need to add to the noise of this loud, troubled year. Instead, what I'd like to hear today from myself and others is simply the sound of silence. Silence from deep inside, the silence of nothing. It's not loneliness or emptiness, but solitude, gentle, complete peace, at home in the dark softness of no sound, no movement, nothing but that of my breathing and the beating of my heart. I want to be in a place, and I invite you to come there, a place where we can let go, be free of the need to say or do or become anything other than what and who we are and would be, if and when we'd step off the wheel of busyness and managing the flow of life around us, which flows on regardless of what we think we can do to or about it, as it pretends to respond to our desires, our noise, and keeps on going as it will. So I'll put down this mic, leave it here at the podium for any of you who want to attend, or want to come forward and take it. I'm going outside, going to drive up the valley in the twilight of this day this year, walk behind the hill behind my house, look out across Garza's Canyon, silent in silhouette as dusk settles into night, stars come out, and to the southwest, Jupiter and Saturn joining, bright and strong, a reprise of their role, the Star of Bethlehem, 2,000 years ago. I'll stand there, no sound but the whoosh of tires of a lone car on the road down below, and a breeze through the pines in my front yard. That's all the noise I'll need. I'll stand there, watch that star shining over the canyon, oaks and chaparral, redwoods deep in the folds of darkness. And in the comfort of this night, solitude, of silence, I'll bow my head, close my eyes, and out loud say what I really want to say to the night, to the world, to all I love, to all who love me. Say simply, quietly, softly, what's been lost in the clamor of this year, a gentle benediction brought home. 2 words, 2 simple words. Thank you. Well, then, the winter solstice led us to Christmas and the New Year. We celebrated at home. There were 3 of us, Kathy and me and our daughter, and an awful lot of Zooming. Not an awful lot, a wonderful lot of Zooming with family and friends across the country and around the world. It was a time of peace and gratitude. I think a time of really exhaling and letting go in the quiet and the darkness of it all. And then in January, notwithstanding seditionists, insurrectionists in Washington, a new administration was inaugurated. And with it, to me, came hope, leading me to write this haiku. 46/1/2021. At the Capitol, Inauguration Day, hope and light reborn. And the GSA gave our 46th president a license plate with number 46 on it, on his car. And that then led me, the hope I should say, led me then to write this poem in connection with something that I found in our garage during one of my attempts to clean things up with the supposed spare time we had in the pandemic. It's called Found. Found during the pandemic lockdown, cleaning the garage. Legislation I'd worked on back in Washington. Bipartisan times. May they finally return. And so here we are now, with some light beginning to show at the end of the tunnel, with the beginning of the end beginning to begin. We're not there yet, but there is hope. And I've written 2 poems, which I'd like now to share with you and with which I'll wrap up our time together. The first is called Timing. Timing. There's a bunch of stuff I should be doing, things in spite of quarantine and lockdown that need to be done. Family things, finances to attend, taxes to prepare, things to fix around the house as best I can. We don't want contractors or repair people coming in, even masked, double masked, socially distanced and all. We've got to be extra careful, for one of us in our bubble is immunocompromised due to medications she takes. And so we wait, deal with things best we can, get vaccinated when tiers open up, clinics too, supplies become available. Know that we are not safe, all of us, not until we all are vaccinated, have gotten through the feeling lousy supposed to come after the second shot, and 2 weeks waiting more to full immunity for it to kick in. At least with regard to the virus now, and maybe its variants, but maybe perhaps not. More testing trials needed, then maybe booster shots and on. It's gray outside today. Flat white light expressing through thin cloud cover that's come up from the tropics. Raw humidity and heat not usual for this time of year. These times while ice and snow shut down Texas, independent, unregulated free market Texas. And my apricot tree outside waiting for me to prune it this week when days are supposed to be cold and crisp with morning frost. My apricot tree feeling instead this tropical warmth that has come along now saying, to hell with it, and decided to bloom beautifully. The long slender canes that don't belong would otherwise be pruned off, cut off, sent to the dump. Canes and all the rest of that old tree now blooming as they will, not waiting for cutting and then winter, cold weather, dormant organic spray. No, they've had it. Don't care what's happening in Texas or supposed to happen here or anywhere else it's cold. They're taking warmth and the weather we have here now, unreasonable, unusual as it may be, and they're blooming. I don't know what kind of crop my unpruned, unkempt tree will give us now this year. Don't know how things will be come summer. So what I'll do instead is just trust that old tree, turn and fertilize the soil at its feet, build a basin out to its strip line, ready for me to water come summer. And for now, I'll put away my shears, let that tree go as it wills, love its blossoms out of place and time as they may be. I'll stand back, stand away, and just let it be. And now, a final poem, Back Home. Back home. Sunny late winter Carmel Valley morning, buds on our maples, new green leaves on the oaks, soft spring grass on the hills. Received my second COVID vaccination yesterday and I'm doing okay. Bit flu-like, tired, aching somewhat, but grateful, waiting for immunity to set in. Got up late, made tea and toast, buttered, Vegemite on the slice, grapefruit marmalade the other, peeled a boiled egg, cut it in half. Opened the patio sliding glass door, a soft earth-scented breeze came in. I stood there, let sunshine warm my face. A pair of robins watched from the fence. I remembered for a moment a morning like this, Lane Cove, Sydney, North Shore, springtime, 1952. My mother had opened the kitchen window. The song on the radio played while she ironed. Pedro the fisherman, she sang along. I sat at our yellow formica top table. She'd given me a big slice of fresh white bread with a nice thick layer of butter and Vegemite. Her beautiful voice carried the song. Smiling, happy, she was singing to me. I was safe, all was well, my world and I content. That contentment coming back as I stand here now, this happy, nearly spring California morning. Forgetting the pandemic for a while, my world beginning to be set right, settled, okay. I turn, sit down at our old oak kitchen table, say a grace of thank you, take my vitamin pills, sip from my mug of tea, bite into my Vegemite, butter, and toast. I reach over, turn on the radio, and a song. Close my eyes, eat slowly. Let Lane Cove, that morning, its peace so long ago, when all was well. Let that peace come back, come home to me again. Thank you.
I'm sure I'm not the only one attending at the moment who has had some contact or some word or some feeling of the importance of the arts and the importance of poetry in our lives. That's I don't know, a torturously perceived silver lining, I suppose. But it's what is happening here, even in this environment of cyberspace, Zoomland. I mean, we are together. And this is a way that we know each other and share each other, specifically by means of the poets who bring forth their work to share in our session. But this is how we are knowing each other. I have to say, I have noticed a little child in one of these pictures with the name of Nielsen. A bit earlier, I don't see right now, but I did see a little baby with us. And that little baby, how old, Robert? You're muted.
He's just on 11 months.
Great.
10 months.
10 months plus, yeah.
I have a 16-month-old grandson, and I have 4 other grandchildren that are a bit older than that. But how are they going to know each other? Well, it's going to include this. You can count on it. So our ways of communicating, and thanks be for the gifts and of poetry. And I say that about all poetry. And all poetry has a place, and all poetry brings us to our places. Catherine, you spoke of ties that bind, something approximately like that. You brought that in one of your poems. You spoke of our place in the cosmos. You also spoke of, in another context, but of beyond anything ever dreamed of. And actually, that's what we're living right now. We're living beyond anything ever dreamed of, at least in some of my older dreams. I could not have imagined how we are gathering here. Thanks to you, Bob, specifically for providing your containment of the past year and the way you chose to share that, present that, contain that, live that, celebrate that, grieve that in your own chant of both prose and poetry. You spoke of silence, and I am reminded of the expression that silence is the sound of the unintentional environment. And then you arrive at thank you. So I shall echo that for everyone in every dimension, on every scale of magnitude. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our poets for sharing. And
Thank everybody for being here too.
yeah.
For being here today.